What do you think is the creepiest, most disturbing unsolved mystery ever? Disclaimer: this video contains graphic speech regarding unsolved murder mysteries. If you have a weak stomach, turn back now. If you are into unsolved murder mysteries, I will try posting links for each story in the description. The Ibadan Forest of Horror in Nigeria. A local taxi driver goes missing and his friends create a makeshift search party and investigate a forest. Instead of finding their friend, they find an abandoned school, or factory, that have the remnants of a hellish torture/murder, ritual killing and human trafficking. 8 survivors were rescued. Numerous body parts, rotting corpses and personal artifacts were found. The perpetrators were never found, although local politicians and ritualists were suspects. Whilst this discovery is disturbing, the mystery for me is that the original taxi driver still hasn't been found. The disappearance of Zeb Quinn. He was 18 years old when he went missing in 2000. Was working his shift at a local Walmart and afterwards wanted to look at a new car with a colleague, when he allegedly received a call that made him take off frantically. After that he was never seen again. The strangest thing is that a few days later his car was found in a parking lot, with the headlights turned on, a pair of lips and an exclamation mark drawn on the back window in pink lipstick, and a live Labrador puppy sitting inside. In 2017 the colleague was arrested for his murder, but all the strange details still make no sense at all. The disappearance of Lars Middag. A German man who went on vacation in Bulgaria in 2014. He was last seen at the airport, where he was brought into a private room by airport security after his mother had called telling them her son was behaving strangely, saying there were people after him over the phone the night before. A few minutes later, he's seen bolting, and I mean full on sprinting out of the room without his luggage. He ran out of airport, scaled the huge fences around the perimeter and was never seen again. Hundreds of witnesses, CCTV footage and a police presence, and the man still basically disappeared off the face of the earth in broad daylight. As a diver, I find the disappearance of Ben McDaniels to be super interesting. They say he went into a cave and never came out, but some of the world's top cave divers looked for him and never found a body. The only evidence that he went diving were staged gas bottles, but they were filled with normal air, not any sort of mixture or anything. The owner of Vortex Springs, where Ben went missing, also died mysteriously the year after. The murder of Lindsay Buziak, a case close to home for me that I don't see mentioned as much as it should. A relatively junior realtor in Victoria, British Columbia, is showing a luxury home to some clients and the clients murdered her. The clients, a man and a woman, cold called her saying they needed to find something to buy ASAP. She was apprehensive of showing the property by herself and asked that her boyfriend come or wait outside or something. Turns out the boyfriend was running late and arrived around as the murder just occurred, but I don't believe he saw anything as the suspects fled through the back door. It's believed that she was the victim of a professional hit for some unknown reason. Also, the cell phone that was used to contact her was purchased by someone with an alias in Vancouver 6 or so months prior and was only ever used to contact her. Las Cruces Bowling Alley Massacre. In February 1990, in Las Cruces, New Mexico, 2 intruders entered the bowling alley through an unlocked door before opening time. The cook, Ida Algeen, was forced by one gunman to go to the office where Stephanie Senek, her 12-year-old daughter Melissa Repass, and Melissa's 13-year-old friend Amy Hauser were being held by the other gunman. The women and girls were forced to lie on the ground while the gunman stole $4,000 to $5,000 from a safe. The alley's pin mechanic, Steve Tehran, arrived at the alley with his daughters, 6-year-old Paula and 2-year-old Valerie, who he'd been unable to find a babysitter for. The gunman then shot everyone. The gunman haphazardly set fire to the office, but it didn't burn much. After they left, 12-year-old Melissa was able to call the police despite being shot 5 times. She and the cook would survive their wounds. Melissa's mother, Stephanie Senek, would initially survive, but would succumb to complications 9 years later. 2-year-old Valerie would survive long enough to be taken to the hospital, but died there. The gunmen have never been identified. After the incident, Stephanie Senek's father, Ronald Senek, who I believe owned the bowling alley and was out of state at the time of the killings, didn't cooperate with authorities. Some believe that the killings might have been a targeted hit in retaliation against Ronald for something he did. Jessica Chambers. She was set on fire in her car and had gasoline poured down her throat. Paramedics found her walking down the lane on fire. The only part of her body that wasn't burned was the bottom of her feet. She did not survive. Police found a suspect but did not have enough evidence to charge him. Paramedics were so traumatized by what they saw, they had to go through therapy, and broke down on stage during interviews. She tried to name her attacker, but her throat was so destroyed, she couldn't be understood. Missy Bevers. A suspect in full SWAT armor breaks into a church and smashes windows, and breaks open doors with a hammer, looking for a local fitness instructor. They then find and beat her to death before getting away. There is high-quality surveillance video of both them in their car, but investigators couldn't make out the license plate. There has been a suspect who was cleared because of an alibi, and there's been no recent updates. Timothy Pitson. A kid who was taken from school by his mother, went to a zoo, a water park and all those fun places a kid would love, and then went missing after his mother killed herself in response to her rocky marriage. She left a suicide note saying sorry and that Timothy would be safe but never found. Pretty sad considering that the father still believes he's out there, but I'm betting he's dead. Lived close to where it happened to, but not when it initially happened. In my opinion, it's the city of San Francisco train derailment that occurred in Hardin, Nevada on August 12, 1939. The train, run by the Southern Pacific Railroad at the time, derailed at a bridge over the Humboldt River at a speed range of 60 to 90 miles per hour. The accident resulted in 24 fatalities and multiple injuries. Days later, investigators discovered tools at the bottom of the Humboldt River, determining that the wreck was caused by sabotage of the rails. The yogurt shop murders that took place in Austin, Texas in late 1991. It's been the subject of a couple episodes on 48 Hours, and a book devoted to the case was published around 5 years ago, Who Killed These Girls? By Beverly Lowry. One case that baffles and fascinates me is that of the Erickson sisters. They are said to have suffered from a shared psychosis known as folie à deux. But what the heck is that and what caused it? They're the 40-year-old twin sisters from Sweden, who became front-page news in the UK in 2008 when they repeatedly ran into traffic on the M6 motorway. A day or two later, one of them, Sabina, stabbed a man to death in his home for no apparent reason. She fled the house, striking herself on the head with a hammer as she ran to a highway bridge. She jumped off, falling 12 meters and landing on a highway. She survived, with several fractures. I've heard the audio from a TV news crew who happened to capture part of the M6 incident and just can't forget one of them yelling at her sister about how they'll steal your organs. Whatever happened to them was intense, sudden and largely unprecedented. In 1969, a student was killed in the stacks of the library at my old college, Penn State, and was found with a singular stab wound on her chest. It wasn't even late or anything, and while there were many suspects, no one was ever arrested for it. It's insane how someone could kill a person in broad daylight at a major university, and get away with it. It's not really anything super crazy, in comparison to other stories here. It's just weird to me personally because I would always study there and I didn't find out about it until after I graduated. The disappearance of the Beaumont children. The Beaumont children are siblings who disappeared in 1966. There are still to this day investigations ongoing to try and find the remains of these children. There have been foundations of sheds and houses dug up. The children have never been found and the suspects has never been identified. The Setagaya family murder. Late on the night of December 30, 2000 in Setagaya, Tokyo, a man broke into the house of a family of 4, strangled the son in his bed, stabbed the father, and brutally killed the mother and daughter. The killer then spent hours in the house eating their food, using their toilet, and going through their paperwork like he owned the place, and eventually left, never to be found since. Honestly, the Cape intruder isn't disturbing, just weird as hell. During the night in Cape, Maine in like 2005, people who kept their doors unlocked would wake up to find a man staring at them and he would quickly flee. No people were ever injured and nothing was ever stolen. They just watched people sleep apparently. What happened to Pedro Lopez? He is one of the most prolific serial killers in history, and claims to have murdered over 350 women and girls. Since his release in 1998, his whereabouts are currently unknown. The death of Rebecca Zahau has stuck with me. Zahau's nude body was found hanging from a balcony, with her wrists and ankles bound and hands behind her back. Her death was ruled a suicide. As if that wasn't strange enough, 2 days prior to her death, the 6-year-old son of her boyfriend fell down a staircase and died. His death was ruled an accident. There's a lot to read about this case, and I highly recommend it if you're into true crime. The Cleveland Torso Murderer. From 1935 to 1938, there was a serial killer who chopped off the heads and appendages of 12 to 20 people and left their torsos for people to find. The famous detective Elliot Ness was on the case, and the killer taunted him by leaving 2 torsos within full view of his office. The killer was never identified, nor were the majority of the victims. The Hinterkaifeck murders always freaked me out. I've read quite a bit about it, and it sounds like it was probably a neighbor. But the creepy part is that the killer was probably living or hiding out in the attic for multiple days beforehand. I read about this for the first time when I went on a multi-night hiking trip. I stayed in cabins. The first night, there was a loft above where we were sleeping. I stared at it all night. Technically not unsolved since everyone can guess what happened to her, but it's one of the creepiest in my opinion. Alyssa Turney was a teenager who disappeared in 2001. Her stepfather, Michael Turney, was obsessed with her. He stalked her at work, put cameras in the vents to spy on her and made her sign contracts to say he never touched her. Michael picked her up from school early on May 17, 2001 and she's never been seen since. Her half-sister, Sarah Turney has an amazing podcast called Voices for Justice which explains the case in detail, and because of her, Michael Turney was arrested in August 2020. In my hometown, there is a case of a 16-year-old girl named Chandra May. She was working in 1982 I think at a McDonald's. My mom was getting off her shift early and Chandra wanted off early instead, so my mom let her swap. She never made it home. Her car was found on her long driveway with the door open. Her purse was open, but nothing taken. She was found almost a month later hog-tied in a lake. She had at least DNA from 2 males. They had kept her hostage for weeks. I may be off on a few facts, but I guess it was so creepy because it was so close to home and they never found her killers. I'll preface by saying it's creepiest locally. There was a number of girls in their 20s that went missing around the Leinster area of Ireland. That's the area that includes Dublin, Meath, Kildare, Wicklow on the east of the country that visitors may know. In the 1990s, no bodies were ever found. There was one guy arrested after kidnapping a girl, after assaulting and beating her multiple times, when she was heard crying and screaming by 2 men out hunting and they rescued her. He was recognized by the men who brought her to the local Garda station, police, and they identified the kidnapper to them. He was arrested the next day at his home and sentenced to 15 years but served only 10 due to the fucked up Irish criminal system where most serve 2/3 of their sentence. The most disturbing part is when the girl was rescued, she said he'd do to me what he did to the rest of them. Larry Murphy was convicted of the rapee, kidnapping, and attempted murder of that girl and fled Ireland after his release from jail. What he did to the rest of them is the chilling part. Is he responsible for the other missing girls? Maybe, probably. Not necessarily the most creepy or disturbing thing I know of, but it was close to me. A friend I went to school with from 6th through 12th grade was driving home when a car pulled up next to his and the driver shot him in the head. Killed him instantly. This was about 7 years ago. No one has any idea why or who the shooter was. No one has ever said anything. He had no enemies, was universally liked, never hurt anyone. He was 20. Our community is not large, someone knows something but has never come forward. Real shame. Had a bright future.